Hey, welcome back everybody. In this video I'm going to try to get all the body panels figured out. I got tail panels aren't lined up, I've got doors are a little bit off, and the fenders are pretty close, but I just want to get all that in before I head to the filler and the rest of sanding. Plus I've got this magical A-body door tool that I may or may not need it. We're going to see, but we'll see what actually happens. All right, I think I'm going to call this. I haven't welded back up or seam sealed it, but I took a lot of hammering and a lot of pounding and a lot of work up in there. Had to grind off the old welds and peel up the old seam sealer. Anyway, I think it's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So, time for the other side. Well, this one turned out to be super easy. All I really had to do is I had to do some clearancing down here so the taillight housing can drop, and I had to open up this hole a little bit on the side so I could align it. And I ended up going to the original one that was on the car because it just fit better, and it came in. I think that kind of told me that this tail panel probably should have been mounted a little bit lower, but that's kind of how it fit. You know, everything else lines up, so I don't know. Anyway, it is really nice now. I'm not going to need any fill or anything. I can just clean that up and paint it. So at the end of it, I'm just going to have to do a little bit of filler work here. That side's looking good. And now I'm going to move up to the door. All right, door and fender alignment. Now, if you watch the other videos, you'll see that when I raised the front of this door up to get this fender to line up and kind of help close that gap up, that raised up the back of the door. And you can see that does not line up. How you get into these A-bodies, you can't, you know, if you have the front fenders on, the bolts are about impossible to get to, and there's about two ways. And one of them is this tool here. It's designed to snake back in there and get to those bolts. And there's also another, like, found, like, you could get a set of these adjustable angle sockets that look like they did a job just fine as well. I was thinking of buying those because I'm a sucker for buying more tools, but I ended up getting this off of eBay, used, and they're not cheap, but I bought it anyway. So I'm going to try to get this door level back here, and then I'm going to go back and tackle the fender, and if I'm happy about how it finishes it, I'll spin the car around and final check the other side, and the major body work's done. Hope. Well, I made some headway. I got the back of the door down. In fact, maybe a hair bit lower, but it's about as far as it can go. And it's a hair bit higher here, and it looks like it could possibly go down a little bit more, but at what point, you know, then that starts looking maybe a little bit too low. And I don't want to get too crazy about it until I get the door seal back on, because that will definitely affect how it is. But I've been spending some time on this alignment, and I am really happy with this. See if you can, you know, that is just nice all the way down. Both ways. It's just, I don't think I could get it any better that. So that is good. The depth here on the door is off. Once again, I want to get that door seal because that will affect how it goes in and out. So the height up here is good too, but there's one thing that's bugging me. If you look at it, the opening is just a little bit bigger on the top and the bottom. So my OCD is screaming at me. I think I'm going to loosen up the bolts, loosen up that front core support on this side, and just lift it up a little bit and see if that's all I need to do to bring it in. Much better. I got the jack lifting up the front end a little bit. I loosened up all the bolts, including the two on the inner fender to the body, and that came right in line. And so I'm going to fool around with putting a little bit of space under it. And I looked at the other side, and I might have to do kind of the same thing, but the door is actually shoved a little far forward on the driver's side. So I'm just going to do this side for now, and then I'll have to reset the fender desk because it's all out. But I think that's going to work. All right, it's all tightened back up. I did end up spacing that front body mount up a ½ an inch, which seems kind of crazy to me. I don't think I need to go up that high. Frame's bent. Who knows? The whole car's got rubber bushings all the way around, so I don't know. I'll worry about it later, but I might be back into that. Anyway, this looks way better. See how nice that gap is? I mean, so it gets a little bit tight on the bottom. Doesn't really open up too much. This looks much better. I end up taking a spacer out in here because that changed everything. But I'm going to call that good. So now I think I'm going to flip the car around and get working on the driver's door. Looking at it real quick, the whole thing's got to scooch back a little bit, and I'm sure there's going to be more adjustments I'm going to have to make. And also that fender, looks like I might be lifting up the other side because it might need just a little bit, but right now it's actually too tight. So, all right, got her spun around, and you can see the gapping here is quite a bit bigger than the gapping here, and that gap is bigger than the other side. However, the heights look pretty good. I don't think I need to do anything there. This is pretty tight, but the height, well, that fender might be a hair bit low, so I might have to go up a little bit. But this gap does grow up from there, so I kind of want to see that, I guess, because I don't like having that spaced up a half an inch more than that. I pulled tape on the whole thing, and yeah, it's a half an inch off. Obviously, you don't want that. I don't like having to lift that up at all, and I'm worried I'm going to have to revisit it. I mean, if I can lift that up the same amount and get everything to work, I'm just going to move on and go with it. But I think I'm going to start by centering the door back and then taking a hard look at that fender and see what I got to do to really dial that in. Well, all right, I got the door slid back. I got a pretty decent gap. The height is good, and I've got a decent gap up here now. And I'm kind of stuck what to do next. The fender needs a little bit more adjusting. It's got to go that way, just a hair bit. And it opens up just a little bit up here, and this is factory stuff. If I pick up the front of the nose to match the other side, that will close in this, of course, but I might bring this in a little bit too tight, and you know, that just may not work out at all. So there's a gap down here, and I think that's, you know, this is a patch panel, and I ground that down to make it smooth, and I think I kind of made that myself. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm not taking this car to SEMA or anything, and so I'm just not sure how crazy I'm going to get about it. But I've got to figure out this front thing. I mean, to make that fender work, that's got to be a half an inch up. That isn't, and it looks okay. I mean, I could go up a little bit, but it kind of defeats the point. So I'm going to have to fool around with it. I thought maybe the body mount on this side maybe was put in wrong and maybe kind of lifting everything up and causing this to happen. So I did a bunch of tape measuring, and it matches the other side just fine. So aftermarket fender maybe I got to bring it back down and actually weld in the rod to fill that in. I don't know. I'll just have to think about it. Well, it's the next morning, and I slept on it, and I decided the spacer under the front radiator support on the one side, it isn't going to fly. It doesn't, you know, it's just not the right way to approach it in this situation. So it's going to come out, and I've decided to put in some actually welding on maybe the fender of the door to close up the gap. But I went ahead and measured everything, and I'll show you what I found. So after I professionally measured or redid the door yesterday, I ended up with, this is about 1/8 of an inch gap all the way up and down. It's a little tighter on the bottom and a little open on the top, but you have to really get into it to see a problem. And here, all the way from here to about here is also about 1/8 of an inch. It's a little open here, which I may or may not do anything about. And this goes up to about 1/4 inch up here. Also, I may or may not do anything about it. Over here on the other side, you can see it in the dark here, but this is 1/4 inch gap, and that's, right now the fender is still raised up in the front. I haven't taken that spacer out yet. And all the way down here, I've got a nice 1/8 inch gap, and it's also an 1/8 inch gap in the back. And so I'm going to take that out and then measure how much of gap I ended up in here, and then I'm going to go get a rod from the hardware store, and I'm going to weld that in and just do this the right way. Well, I took the spacer out. There's a 1/2 inch spacer to get that fender alignment, and something interesting happened. Is once I tightened it all back down, I didn't loosen anything back here when I did it, is that the gap stayed exactly the same. And I think I'm just gonna, I don't think I have to weld up anything. So I've got 1/8 inch all the way up to about here, and then it slowly opens up and goes to 1/4, and the other side is exactly the same. I measured it all out, and that's with factory parts. So I'm gonna call it good. I guess there's enough malleability in this entire fender and setup that is maybe one way to adjust it. I don't know. This is literally my first rodeo, but I'm going to take that as a win. So I'm going to call the body panels good. I mean, it's 1/8 inch pretty much all the way around. It's like a little bit up there. There's a little bit of a gap down there at the bottom of the door. I'm just going to let that one go. I don't think it's worth the effort. It just widens up just a little bit like at the top. I do need to pull off that one taillight side and weld in the part of the metal I broke loose, re-seam seal it, put her back together, and that's done. So I'm at the point now where you need to start thinking about sanding down the entire car and putting a base, like a primer sealer, so I have got a level playing field, or just start doing some filler and working on that. I've been doing some research online. I mean, this is literally my first rodeo at auto body. And I guess there's 2 ways to approach this, and it just depends on who you talk to. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer there, but I'm thinking of just spraying the whole car in base sealer so I have an even playing field and then going up from there. But I will keep looking into it and figure out what I got to do. Well, I decided to get some more done on the car, and so I've been out here with my cheapo DA, and I've just been hitting the entire thing with 220. I decided to just go ahead and get that part of it done before I get to the filler part, and really try to figure out really how much filler do I think I need. And I found some interesting stuff. So I talked about it a little bit earlier, but now that I got some of the paint off the areas, let's take a look at the rear wheel well and the other quarter panel, because I found a potential new problem, of course. So this quarter panel had some slight bubbling on it. And you can tell I got a little bit of rust in there. It's not bad, but you can't let that be. That's got some pitting there, may go all the way through. So that'll get cut out, and I'll probably have to weld in a little chunk there. And okay, and over on this side, I found a little bit of filler. The paint was cracking a little bit, so I knew something was going on. So the 220 wasn't really cutting it down, so I switched to 80 grit on my DA, and I got some stuff in here, so I'm going to end up having to take all this stuff off, cleaning up the metal, and then I'll probably end up just with some new filler. But not the end of the world. But I guess that's how these surprises go. I'm also fighting water real bad, but I live in the PNW, and it has just been raining and raining and raining. It's actually snowing now. Not just raining, but actually snowing. I keep my air compressor drained down, and I've got not 1 but 2 water traps. But what happens is I've got another 50-foot hose that I'm doing my work in. And what happens is the air is cooling off in there, and so it's causing condensation, and it's coming out in the DA. So I can deal with it that way, but that's not going to happen while I paint. So I'm thinking I'm just going to get another air trap and mount it up here on the wall. And when it does come to paint, I'll run that line into that, and I've got another extension hose, and that'll give me a chance to catch it after the air is completely cooled down, and I think that'll be all right. But I've already spent hours and hours on this. I still have to do underneath the trunk, the door jambs, and I haven't even touched the hood yet. That I'm going to get them to today. My hands are already killing me, but maybe in the next few days I'll get this done, and I can think about finishing up those 2 spots I did find, and then a little bit of sealer and maybe a thick primer, hopefully. Well, what do you think, girl? Huh? Can you help me? Can you help me do this door? Yeah. Yep. Hop in there and drive it off.